Ever wondered what life was really like for a medieval peasant? Spoiler alert, it wasn't all knights and castles, and definitely not as glamorous as we see in the movies. In fact, life as a peasant was a daily struggle of hard work, unpredictable weather, and, well, a lot of mud. But despite all the challenges, peasants were the backbone of medieval society. Stick around as we take a deep dive into the gritty, and sometimes surprisingly intriguing, life of a medieval peasant. Don't forget to hit that like button if you enjoy learning about history, and make sure you ask all your burning questions in the comments. First, let's set the stage. Peasants made up about 90% of the population during the medieval period. Imagine living in a world where most people didn't know what a vacation was. Seriously, there were no beach resorts or spa days. Instead, peasants were the farmers, the laborers, the cooks, and the builders of medieval society. Without them, the whole system would have collapsed. That's right, if it weren't for peasants, there'd be no food, no castles, and probably no historical documentaries to watch on YouTube. Well, no good ones, anyway. These guys worked hard. Every day. From sunup to sundown. And they didn't get paid in gold or silver like the nobles, they were lucky to get a decent meal. But, hey, at least they got to eat bread, right? Peasants were mostly farmers. Their main job was to grow food for themselves, their families, and of course, the landowners. Picture this, you wake up before the crack of dawn, and your day starts with a heavy load of work, plowing fields, sowing seeds, and tending to animals. And let's not forget the weather. If it rained too much, the crops could rot. If there was a drought, nothing would grow. That's a whole lot of stress for a farmer with a pitchfork. But it wasn't just about farming. Peasants also had to tend to their animals, cows, chickens, sheep, and make sure everyone was fed, healthy, and, well, not running away. Because let's face it, animals can be pretty unpredictable. Now, let's talk about the luxury accommodations. Peasants didn't have cozy stone cottages with indoor plumbing, oh no, no. Instead, they lived in small, one-room homes made of wattle and daub, with thatched roofs. The walls were thin, and so were their beds. Imagine spending every night huddled up with your family on a mattress filled with straw, hoping that the weather would hold up, and that rats, insects, and maybe even the occasional cow wouldn't be your bedtime companions. And don't even get me started on hygiene. Medieval peasants didn't have showers or baths like we do. In fact, they might only bathe once or twice a year. Yeah, you heard me right. Imagine being surrounded by, well, fragrance. And not the good kind. Now, here's the kicker, peasant life wasn't just about working the land. It was also about paying taxes. And guess who they had to pay those taxes to? That's right, their local lords and the church. So, if you were a peasant, you spent a significant chunk of your year working for free, just so you could hand over most of what you grew or earned to your overlords. It's like working overtime. Without getting paid. And if you didn't meet your quota, well, there were consequences. Some peasants had to give up their homes or even work for their lord for extra time. It wasn't exactly a fair system, but it was the world they lived in. And remember, your noble lord probably wasn't doing any work himself, he was too busy holding court and throwing lavish feasts that you'd probably never be invited to. Let's move on to something a little more appetizing, food. A peasant's diet was mostly bread, vegetables, and maybe some dairy or eggs. The occasional meat. Yeah, that was a rare luxury. Think about it, your typical meal might consist of a stale loaf of bread, some cabbage, and maybe a bit of porridge. Not exactly a gourmet meal, but it filled the stomach. And don't even think about getting picky. Beggars couldn't be choosers. But here's the interesting part, peasants actually had some pretty tasty foods during special occasions. On feast days, they could indulge in roasted meats, pies, and maybe even a little wine. It's like they got to live the dream once a year. But then it was back to the cabbage. And, of course, the church. The church was pretty much everywhere in medieval life. Peasants attended mass regularly, and the church provided spiritual guidance. And a lot of rules. But here's the catch, the church was also a major landowner, so you guessed it, they were part of the tax system too. And they'd often collect a tithe, which was 10% of a peasant's income. So, yeah, the church didn't skip out on their cut either. Still, the church was a source of comfort and community. Peasants would come together at the local church for special events like weddings, baptisms, and even festivals. It wasn't all work and no play, they did have moments to gather and celebrate life. Even if that celebration came with a side of guilt. So, there you have it, life as a medieval peasant was tough, often unpleasant, and full of hard work. But despite all the challenges, peasants were the lifeblood of medieval society. They worked the land, fed the people, and kept the medieval world running, one loaf of bread at a time. If you're fascinated by the lives of peasants or curious about other historical topics, make sure to leave your questions or thoughts in the comments below. We love hearing from you. And if you enjoyed this dive into the past, don't forget to like and subscribe for more fascinating historical deep dives. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time on Historical Finder.